Georgia has population size close to the population of Denmark, Finland, Singapore and Ireland. With the current economic development right now, do you see it get to the same level as those countries? And if yes, how long do you think it might take it?
It's extremely difficult to predict, of course. By the way, Georgia is only 3.7 million inhabitants, less than we thought, meaning that it's a much smaller country than the ones that you are referring to. Georgia is in a difficult regional environment. We know the events in Ukraine, in other parts of the region. So it means that Georgia is affected by all this turmoil with its neighbors, and the growth, for instance, for this year should not be higher than 2% GDP growth, which means that Georgia indeed is far from being in a position to catch up with European countries, even and more so with northern or Nordic countries. If I had to compare with a country, I would rather use or choose Singapore, which is also a hub, a regional hub, well placed, and Georgia, of course, has the ambition to play that role here when it comes to, of course, transit of energy, of goods coming from China, for instance, because Georgia will be on the Silk Road.
So lari is Georgian currency. Because Georgia depends so much on European Union economy and Russian economy, and both euro and ruble had major fluctuations in the past few months. How is lari doing right now?
No, the lari actually has depreciated against the dollar by 30% in the last month, which is quite significant in a very dollarized economy. Mm-hmm. It has lost much less compared to the euro, but also the lari has lost compared to its main trade partners, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia. So in fact, Georgia has lost a lot of competitiveness in the past 6 months. Now we see a kind of stabilization, but we have to see whether it's sustainable in the long term. In any case, Georgia will have to take measures and to implement structural reforms in order to compensate for this lari depreciation.
Have they started anything yet?
Not yet. So far, they have left the lari floating, which is a very good policy, because there is an automatic adjustment, and now we see that after a fall in exports because of loss of competitiveness, now the imports are falling too. So there is a natural automatic adjustment, but probably it's not enough, and the government is devising now a new package of reforms, like in the field of pension reform, capital market reform, insurance reforms.
IMF is praising Georgian central bank being very efficient and being able to produce an excellent national payment system and settlement system. And how is it functioning right now?
Well, the National Bank of Georgia is independent and is managed by a very competent team, a very competent chairman. Unfortunately, this bank has been under attack in the recent days and weeks by some parties which accuse the National Bank of Georgia of not doing enough to compensate the depreciation of the lari. Although we believe, and the IMF believes, that the National Bank is acting very wisely by letting the lari float and not using scarce reserves, currency reserves. So the bank is independent, is very professional, and I think that there will be no changes in terms of independence because I mean not all the parliament is behind this new proposed amendments, but also Georgia benefits from a very stable and sound commercial banking sector. That's one of the big assets of Georgia, and so far, despite the depreciation of the lari, despite the hydroization of the economy, the interest rates have been kept relatively low, and we don't see any credit crunch yet. So banks continue to give loans to the consumers, but also to the manufacturing sector, which is quite positive. But we have to see now how long all this stability will last, considering the pressures on the lari.
Do you think they will continue their capital free flow policy for the next few years?
Definitely. I think there are no capital control. It's a very open economy, very free economy, and it's in the interest of the country, particularly now, to attract foreign direct investments and to have a free movement of capitals. So we expect this policy to continue in the coming months and years.
When we look at Georgian central bank and banking system and financial system in general, would you say it's closer to American system, closer to European system, or to their past Soviet system, or they've been able already to develop something on their own?
No, I mean, it's closer to Western standards by all means. There is a very prudential policy following Basel rules. So I would say it's totally Western banking system. Of course, dollarized, but closely linked to Europe, because you have a number of European banks which are present on the market. I mean, which have bought shares of local banks. And we have also, for instance, the European Bank, the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which also possesses equities in local banks. So I would say very sound system, very integrated into the European banking market and sector.
Georgia has some gold mines, and they mine it. How do they manage their gold reserves?
Georgia has no gold reserves. I mean, at the level. I mean, in terms of if you talk about reserves at the level of the National Bank or Central Bank of Georgia, of course they have mined. They have some reserves, but not enough to build an economy around it. And plus, there are some environmental concerns. As we know, or you may know, that the main gold mine in Georgia is close to a historical site. And we know that cultural activists and environmental activists would like to reduce the gold mining in order to preserve unique world sites in terms of archaeology and in terms of history. So it's a sector which is exporting, but I wouldn't say that you would build an economy on that. Plus, the National Bank of Georgia has no gold reserve, as I said.
Well, judging by the numbers that the government provides in its official reports, Georgian budget gets a similar contribution from its gold mines, and export of nuts and export of wines. So do you see agricultural sector contributing more in the future to the economy rather than any mining sector?
Yeah, probably, because we have seen now that despite or because the crisis in Russia and Ukraine, I mean, the agriculture exports to the EU have increased dramatically in the past months by 50%. It's of course about, we are talking about products which are already exported, like hazelnuts, wine and water. So I would say the challenge for Georgia would be to find new markets for different kinds of agricultural products, be it raw or processed. and that's still in the making. As you know, Georgia signed an association agreement with the EU last year with a deep and comprehensive free trade area. So the European market is open to any agriculture product from Georgia, of course, provided it is level of European standards. So I see prospects for honey, for other kinds, biological vegetables and fruits, for instance. But of course, once again, I mean, you cannot build an economy only on exporting agriculture products. So Georgia will definitely have to find some new niches. We'll have to manufacture, maybe to develop services here to export more in terms of services and goods to the European Union. Gold and agricultural products are not enough to build a sound exporting economy.
In 2013, Georgia was considered a low-income country, a low-income per capita country. Where are they right now?
But it's even worse because with the depreciation of the lari in dollar terms, of course, the revenue per capita has gone down. So it's still, I would say, a low-income country, definitely. Also with big disparities within the country between the cities and the rural areas, but also in the city between the well-off people and the rest of the population. So that was what I was saying in the beginning, that with 2% growth, I mean, it will take decades for Georgia to catch up with the most advanced European countries, for instance. Georgia would need a much bigger growth, which is hampered now, I would say, by the regional crisis in Ukraine, in Russia, and of course also Armenia, Azerbaijan. So the environment is difficult. I mean, the fundamentals are good in Georgia, but there are a number of external challenges which limit growth right now in Georgia.
But as far as I understand, everything internally, all the laws and infrastructure for financing is excellent. Where do you see their immediate success? In what industry would you say they can have success tomorrow?
I would say textile, or I think the textile industry. Indeed, I get regular confirmation that companies are interested to invest into textile plants here in order to put a Made in Georgia label and then to export to the EU, because Georgia will be equal to Made in the EU thanks to our association agreement. And what is interesting that these textile enterprises are medium-sized or small or medium-sized. Because Georgia has been very good in attracting large companies like BP, like Ferrero, or to build big infrastructure projects in the field of hydropower plants and dams. But I think what Georgia would need now is to develop this fabric of small and medium enterprises, and textile contribute to it, the textile industry. And also services, for instance, in the health system. Georgia would like to become a kind of hub for the neighboring countries. The health sector is privatized here, not cheap, but is very good, and that could be a service that Georgia could render to other countries, I mean to citizens of other countries. And also I see maybe in the field of medicines, production of medicines, not for local consumption, but for re-export either to the EU or maybe to other third countries.
Well, thank you very much for a very interesting interview.